What's up, everybody, and welcome in to another edition of the Sit Down. As always, if you enjoy this video, please make sure you hit the like button and let me know what you think of today's discussion in the comment section below. If you're new around here, you just haven't done it yet, or you're living on a rock and seeing this video for the first time, I don't know what you're waiting for. Hit that subscribe button below now so you never miss another sit down video. Today, ladies and gentlemen, we are going to get into another very interesting organized crime topic, and the family that's gotten the most out of the many years of the mafia is probably the Genovese crime family. They have done it by being what many would call the Ivy League of the mob. They're a fascinating group of individuals led by people like Vincent Gigante, Vito Genovese, Fat Tony Salerno, and others. Today, we're going to get into an individual that really, in my estimation, is one of the more interesting people ever associated with the Genovese family, a guy who early in his career caught the eye of the chin, a man who down the road was a very formidable earner and enforcer. He would get his own crew and operated mostly out of New Jersey. His demise would be involved in a bizarre situation involving a confidential informant. The story of the very interesting Angelo Prisco. Next on the sit down, Angelo Prisco was born in August of 1939. He would come up in East Harlem. Now, from what I understand, now this is a method of contention. Now, I will admit, I attempted to reach out to the son of Angelo Prisco, who's been pretty active on Facebook and other forums involving the life of his father. Seems like a pretty interesting guy in his own right. And I was trying to get through Scott Deach as well some information regarding this. From what I understand, it's rumored that a very close relative, possibly his father, Angelo Prisco's father, was a person called Rudolph Prisco. Now, Rudy Prisco was identified in the early 60s by Joe Valachi as supposedly a member of the Genovese crime family, and he was operating under the crew of Vincent Jimmy Blue Eyes Allo. Now, as I said, I was unable to actually find that to be fact, but we can just say that it is proven that Prisco is a very close relative to Rudy Prisco. So in his blood, Angelo Prisco had the mafia. Now, I will also say it is very well known that Angelo Prisco is a first cousin to Michael and Joe Meldish. Now, we know the name Meldish through the East Harlem Purple Gang, which is something that a young Angelo Prisco would get involved with in the early 70s. He would join his cousins alongside his brother, Pasquale Patty Prisco, and they would run the streets. Now, I will admit, we've done a video involving the East Harlem Purple Gang, and I'll include that. I urge you to check it out. The East Harlem Purple Gang is a fascinating group. I interviewed Scott Deach, who wrote the book on the East Harlem Purple Gang. They were essentially a very high-level quasi-farm team that operated in drug trafficking out of East Harlem, as well as weapons trafficking and other things. And a lot of it was done on behalf of themselves, but also for members of the mafia. Now, I'm not going to go through the exploits of them. I urge you to check that show out. But it was rumored that Angelo Prisco was one of the first people in the East Harlem Purple Gang to gain some sort of interest from the Genovese crime family. He was putting in work. He was starting to impress people. And he would eventually, in the late 70s, be put on record with the Genovese crime family. Now, down the road, Prisco, we'll get into, becomes a made member. And also other members of the East Harlem Purple Gang will become made members of the mafia, including Danny the Lion Leo, as well as a very young Michael Mancuso. Now, I do believe that is Michael Mancuso in the middle of this photo, also alongside Michael Meldish and on the left, Angelo Prisco. So a lot of these guys would graduate into becoming members of the mafia. And to be fair, all of them would become very formidable members of the mafia, either bosses or capos or acting bosses. The East Harlem Purple Gang had a lot of good results as far as down the road in the mafia. Now, for Angelo Prisco, he was gaining quite the reputation down in East Harlem. It was said that he would hang around the area of 108th Street, which is where the Meldishes were from. He would gain the eye of Vincent Gigante himself alongside his brother Mario Gigante. By this point, Mario was a capo up and around the Bronx, Yonkers, that area, which is where Prisco was now living and moving around, had a foothold in. And it's regarded that in the late 70s, 1978 to be exact, at the age of 39, Angelo Prisco became a made member in the Genovese crime family. Now, according to his son, Michael, who I said has been pretty active on social media, he would say that as a young child, really in his teens, he would regularly drive his father, Angelo Prisco, to Chin Gigante Social Club down in Greenwich Village on Sullivan Street at the Triangle Social Club. So, he was regularly indebted. And I think Angelo Prisco really gained an impressive foothold early. He had the chops, he had the ability. And Vincent Gigante realized it wasn't just earners. We want earners, which is Angelo Prisco was, but it can be discussed, and we'll talk about it. Angelo Prisco was a very formidable dude in the streets. He knew a lot of people. He got things done. And these are the types of people that were able to build people like Mario Gigante and ultimately his brother Vincent Gigante into the powers that they were. You need all sorts of people for the wheels of a family to turn. And Angelo Prisco was one of those important guys. Now, in the 80s, Prisco was said to be at one point in the crew of Mario Gigante. He was making money. He was earning money the hard way on the street, extorting, stealing. Throughout the life of Angelo Prisco, we will learn that he was a very formidable thief. He could steal a lot, but he was also involved with the feasts, the many feasts that were in the New York area at the time. Around 1988, the late 80s, we know that the Genovese crime family, as well as other families, were very active on the New Jersey waterfront. And the Genovese family has always had a very formidable base of operations in and around the New Jersey, New York waterfront, with groups like the International Longshoremen's Association. Now, around this time, a former boxer turned mobster, a person called John DiGilio, was ID'd as a member of the Genovese crime family. I mean, he was working very closely with people like Bobby Manna, who was very active in New Jersey. And DiGilio had essentially become the number 2 in control of the ILA in North New Jersey. He was at one point the treasurer and essentially ran the ILA on behalf of the Genovese crime family. But by the late 80s, DiGilio would be indicted by the federal government. He started acting stupid. He wanted to represent himself at trial. He was inviting celebrities to come to his trial. And certain people began to be very annoyed by that. Look, this was a big moneymaker for the mafia, particularly the Genovese crime family, and for people like Bobby Manna. That unwanted attention eventually was just too much. He, alongside allegedly Vincent Gigante, would put in motion the hit on John DiGilio. He would turn up dead in the Hackensack River in May of 1988. Now, for people like Angelo Prisco, this ultimately worked out for him because alongside other people, Angelo Prisco started being a part of the presence of the Genovese crime family in New Jersey. He would assume some control in New Jersey, and he would also act as a go-between between people like Vincent Gigante and Bobby Manna in New Jersey. So again, the involvement, the connection of Prisco to the Gigante crew was very important to his rise in the family. Again, it's just like regular life for most people. You become something in life, A, because of your talent, but B, also, it's all about who you know, right? It's just that simple. Connections are important. And for Angelo Prisco, they were. In 1992, around this time, it's rumored that Angelo Prisco becomes a captain. And one of the ways he becomes a captain involves his involvement in the murder of a person called Angelo Sangiulo. Now, Sangiulo is the cousin of Angelo Prisco. According to Prisco, he would talk about this in wiretaps, about how readily involved his cousin Sangiulo was with robberies. Him, his cousin, they were all involved with robberies. And he would say regularly that Sangiulo had robbed a lot of people and that he had saved his ass many times. But Sangiulo began robbing gambling dens owned by Anthony Tony D. Palumbo. He was a Bronx member of the mafia. He started getting pissed off, and Sangiulo just became a problem for the Genovese family. He was robbing everything, and he wasn't wising up. So Tony D makes a problem. He ushers it up to Vincent Gigante, and Gigante essentially, according to the government, approves the murder of Sangiulo. Now, the Genovese crime family knew that to get to Sangiulo, they would likely have to go through his cousin, Angelo Prisco. Now, Prisco was involved with creating the involvement of the gunman, setting Sangiulo up. He was the guy that, according to the federal government, put this all in motion. He would contact a member of his crew, a person called Johnny Balls Leto, as well as another person called Paul Gaccione. He would say that Prisco ordered them to be the gunman in this case, and that they would lure Sangiulo to the Giglio Boys Social Club in the Bronx. At that point, they would take care of business, get him in a van, and off him. Now, Leto down the road would become a mob informant. Now, I want to talk about what he would tell the government involving the plan. Now, he would testify that the plan was to leave the van and Sangiulo's body in a McDonald's parking lot about a mile away from the social club, and that Angelo Prisco was a few cars behind a red Cadillac he drove those days, ready to drive Leto away from the drop point of the van. Now, according to John Leto, he would say that he didn't have much time and that he was told to take full advantage of the roar of the overhead train on Westchester Avenue to get the job done. Leto would say, quote, "We proceeded to go under the L tracks. As we were driving, a train came overhead. I found that to be the perfect opportunity to do what I had to do. I was talking to Sangiulo. I proceeded to take a pistol out of my pocket. I turned around and I shot and killed him in the back seat. It actually went like this," he said, cocking the fingers of his right hand in the shape of a gun. "I quickly turned around. We were talking, and I just shot him like that, thrusting his right hand out for emphasis." Now, he would say that the 32-year-old victim, Sangiulo, was shot 6 times in the body, and then with the muzzle of the gun up against the left side of Sangiulo's cheek, he fired a full final bullet into his face. According to Leto, he died pretty quick, but he fired the last face shot just to be sure that he was deceased. Now, we'll find out this is very, very destructive testimony to Angelo Prisco. But subsequent to this murder, Prisco allegedly becomes a capo in the Genovese crime family. And this is something where we find out that he is actually a very capable individual. We would learn that, as I said, Angelo Prisco's main ability in life was he was formidable. He had connections, but he could steal. It was regarded that by this point, between the years of 1991 and 1993, Angelo Prisco was overseeing a robbery crew that was allegedly sticking up jewelry dealers that were moving large amounts of cash, gold, and jewelry. And that he regularly bragged about the fact that he would get bags of gold and 20, 30, 50, 100 grand in cash. And he would, at his social club, regularly talk about newspaper articles involving this crew and that they were behind it. So he was making money. Things were good for Angelo Prisco. Things were also good at home. He was expanding. He had 5 kids by this point, and he was expanding not only in Bergen County, Passaic County, Hudson County, but he was also moving in to the areas of the Jersey Shore, including Monmouth County as well. At one point, it was even said that he had had a residence in Toms River, New Jersey. But by the mid to late 90s, the law started catching up to Angelo Prisco. He would be arrested in 1997 and faced the fact that he was allegedly involved with an arson dating back to 1994. In 1998, Angelo Prisco would plead guilty to arson charges and be hit with a 12-year New Jersey state prison sentence. Now, by 2002, he was up for parole, and he would face the parole board, to which the New Jersey State Parole Board would deny Angelo Prisco release. That would happen in May of 2002. Now, quickly, several months later, in August of 2002, Angelo Prisco would suddenly be sprung from the New Jersey state prison system. Now, according to a parole board member, he would say that a member of Governor James McGreevy's legal team reached out to him, allegedly on behalf of Mr. McGreevy, to release Angelo Prisco. Now, Jim McGreevy, who would down the road become a disgraced governor, he would say that never happened. One thing we know for sure is Angelo Prisco was released. Now, one of the conditions of Mr. Prisco's release was he could not leave the state of New Jersey, which I think for him was fine by this point. He had moved his operations way back 10 years before, and he really only went into New York to see members of the Genovese Crime Family, but he headed his operations in the area of Fair Lawn, New Jersey, out of a bowling alley just outside of Paterson. And if you can see this chart and map, it's very easy to get from New York into New Jersey. So it allowed him to set up shop and be very close to members of the mafia that needed to see him just over the river in New York. Now, as I said, he goes right back to the streets. He has a foothold in New Jersey. He's operating all over New Jersey. Members of his crew, including this individual, a person called Louis Popolo, were operating in and around New Jersey. Members of his crew also included one of his top people, a person called Michael Visconti, who we'll get into in a second as well. Now, as I said, he goes right back to the street. What does Angelo Prisco do best? His people steal. And he goes right back into that business. Angelo Prisco allegedly oversaw a group including Louis Popolo and a person called John Rocky Maliarchik. Now, Maliarchik was not Italian, but he was very much trusted as an associate of Angelo Prisco. And Angelo Prisco's crew stole shit. They were a home invasion crew. Now, I want to talk about Maliarchik because this robbery crew was pretty damn brutal. At one point, it was entered into evidence down the road that they had a gym they were in control of or knew someone that was in control of. At that point, in the kind of upper areas of Rockland County, Newburgh, that area, around this time, Orange County Choppers was becoming popular. They had a television show on Discovery Channel, and the owner of this place, Paul Tatul, regularly went to the gym that these guys were connected to. They would allegedly find out that Mr. Tatul lived in and around the upstate New York area, and that at his home in 2003, they found out that he was supposedly in possession of a ton of money. So on October 19, 2003, Louis Popolo allegedly, as well as Mr. Milarchik, went to the location of Paul Tatul to rob it. Now, sadly, and I guess good for Tatul, neither him nor his girlfriend were home. However, an elderly couple that was house sitting for the family was pistol whipped in an attempt to find money, but they did not succeed in finding any money. Now, according to U.S. prosecutor at the time, Ellie Honig, he would say they had an inside tip that they had a significant amount of cash in his home from his business and that they allegedly just missed it because the money was actually there. It was just in the attic. Now, it's also been regarded that Milarchik and his robbery crew were pretty disgusting individuals as well. At one point, they were involved in a successful home invasion in which 2 women and a 5-year-old child were beaten and terrorized before the robbers, including people called Dominic Mamoli and 2 Albanian brothers called Danny and Enid Gelai, made off with a several $100,000 in cash and jewelry. So, all of this tricked up to Mr. Prisco allegedly, and they were involved in some pretty awful things. Nonetheless, Angelo Prisco was making money. He was well liked and connected in the Genovese crime family. Around this time in 2004, alongside one of his trusted aides, Michael Visconti, Angelo Prisco would attend a birthday party in Jersey City, New Jersey. At that time, he would be introduced to a person called Jeff Santini. Now, Jeff Santini was vouched for by a member and an associate of the mafia that Angelo Prisco and Michael Visconti knew. And it was said that quickly Angelo Prisco took a liking to Jeff Santini. Now, in the subsequent months to meeting Mr. Santini, he would become the driver to Angelo Prisco. He would be seen hanging around the bowling alley that Prisco did business out of. He would even, according to reports, be involved with collecting payoffs relating to different contractors involved with the San Gennaro feast. Now, at one point, Angelo Prisco would tell Santini directly that he had people involved in the feast, and that for years he was doing favors for people, and that, quote, the people that run that's my friends, Vinny and Michael. And that would be Prisco discussing the fact that he not only knew Vinny Basciano seen here, but that he also for years had known Michael Mancuso, who he went way back to the 70s with in the East Harlem Purple Gang, and that everything kind of flowed up to them. Now, by this point, it had become widely known that the Bonanno crime family had controlled the San Gennaro feast through a soldier in the family called Perry Criscitelli. Criscitelli was a restaurant owner, and according to Vinny Basciano, an earner only, and that he ran the San Gennaro feast in New York. So not only was the Bonanno crime family involved, but it has been widely known that over the years, the Genovese family was involved with the feast as well, and that Prisco was making out with that. He was using Santini and Michael Visconti to collect payments. Now, at this point, I want to talk about a very widely known wiretapped conversation between Mr. Santini and Mr. Prisco. This happens in and around Christmas of 2004. The bug is placed in the car of Jeff Santini, okay, and they are wired for sound. And the video or the audio evidence is quite good. I'm going to talk about some of the various things Prisco says. At one point, Prisco discusses that he ain't a rat. Quote, I'm a good man. I don't make no big thing out of it, hey. When I was away and I told them, if this guy Chin was home, this never would have happened. I'm a good man. Know what I mean? I didn't do nothing wrong. I'm no fucking rat. I did my time. I did my 12 years when I was 58 years old. I'm a man. At one point, Santini and Mr. Prisco discussed that he's worried that at one point, maybe he'll be killed. Prisco would say, quote, I don't do nothing wrong. If they want me, I come. I ain't got no dirty mind. You know what I mean, Jeff? I have no deep, dark secrets that they're going to say, you did this, you did that, you know? Nah, I don't think that's going to be anything like that. Hey, though, it's my life. That's my life. There's nothing I can do about it. And that regards to him that to the end, he is a gangster and that he will take his punishment if it comes, regardless of when it is. Now, they would joke about the fact that that's not going to happen because Santini is there to protect him. And Santini even says at one point, quote, I'll run them over if it comes to that. Prisco likes Santini. He almost looked at him as a quasi protege, if you will. Now, little did he know, there were some very dark things that he did not know about Santini. Now, at one point in the conversation, they just discuss mob life in general. They discuss the Gotti family. At one point, Santini says, Peter just got convicted. Angelo responds, who? Peter Gotti. Now, Angelo Prisco would respond and tee off on Peter Gotti, quote, he's a fucking imbecile, a jerk off. You want to send two guys to kill a guy who ratted on your brother? Kill him before he rats. You know what I mean, Jeff? Kill him before. Don't kill him after. That's compounding the fucking felony. Stupid, you know? He wasn't the sharpest knife in the drawer anyway. Then again, though, all of them. I hate them fucking gangsters. They single-handedly destroyed this life. Jeff responds, you think it was his downfall, Gotti? The flashiness? I mean, I don't want to bring it up. Prisco would respond, quote, his downfall was his ego. That was his downfall. All them tapes they got of him in that woman's apartment, okay? He didn't know they were being taped. But you got Sammy the Bull. That's your underboss. You got this other guy, Frankie Loke, who's your consigliere. You got to explain to them the fucking life? He put himself in there. You got to explain to them the life. This is ours. It's our thing. You don't talk to underlings. You don't talk to a boss, an underboss like that. Why? They don't know? Question mark. So, as we can see, Prisco is very animated. He discusses all sorts of things in this about 12-minute discussion. He also gets into the fact of his involvement in the Steven Seagal extortion attempt by the Gambino crime family. And it was regarded that one of the people that smoothed that out was Angelo Prisco, who happened to know Steven Seagal. Now, in the end, for Angelo Prisco, all of this would come undone. In December of 2008, he would be indicted for the 1992 murder of his cousin, as well as the armed robberies over the years that he allegedly oversaw, as well as extortion and other crimes. Now, I want to discuss what would do him in. Ultimately, pretty much everyone associated with Angelo Prisco would cooperate, including the gunman in the case of his cousin, John Leto, his counterpart and top aide, Michael Visconti. He would flip as well as Jeff Santini. We would learn a bombshell, and so would Prisco, about Santini. It would be found out that Santini was not a criminal. He was a bail bondsman from Hackensack, New Jersey, who in his 30s allegedly found out he was the son of John DiGilio, the man who Prisco was allegedly involved with his murder 20 plus years before. Now, the FBI would say down the road that he was not related to DiGilio, but believed he was. Now, it was also regarded that Santini was a total scumbag who owed everybody money, wanted out from under it, and went to the government and said he would willingly cooperate with them. So they wired him for sound. He kind of looked like a gangster, and they connected him to it. Now, Prisco probably should have had his guard up a little bit more, but the problem for Angelo Prisco, and from what I understand, I don't know this to be fact, but I found out through my research that it really seemed like in the end, Angelo Prisco never really had that legit income, right? He was always grasping, he was always robbing and dealing and doing what he had to do to survive. And then he really didn't take any of the money that he had earned over the years and invested in any real business. Now, I'm sure he had money, but it always seemed like his desperation was his problem. And I related a lot to another video I did on Vinny Asaro. Vinny Asaro was a degenerate gambler, at one point was a drug addict, and he had that addictive personality. He was obsessed with gambling. He threw all his money into nonsense, and in the end was dealing with people like Gene Borello and guys like that because he was desperate. He still had to make money, and people like Prisco don't know how to be regular people. They always are gangsters to the end, and I'm sure Prisco just realized, I fucked up here. Now, in the end, in August of 2009, Angelo Prisco would be sentenced to life in prison. At one point, he would tell an FBI agent about the fact that he had diabetes and that he had stopped all of his treatments and that now that he had had life, he was going to eat what he wanted. He didn't care anymore. Now, I did discuss the family, a little bit of Angelo Prisco. He had 5 kids, 1 daughter and 4 sons. And his son, Michael Prisco, in a very interesting blog post, in a post by Ed Scarpo, Costa Nostra News, Michael Prisco would detail, and this is supposedly him, the fact that the prison stay for Angelo Prisco was brutal. By this point, he had diabetes. It was also talked about that he had his whole leg amputated and died chained to a bed, similar to other gangsters. But he would also say that everyone in the end respected him and that he went out like a gangster. Angelo Prisco would ultimately die on June 21st, 2017, at USP Coleman in Florida. As I said, he was in very poor health. He was 77 years old. He would ultimately have a funeral in the Bronx at Balsamo Funeral Home. Before we go, I want to leave you with a quote from Angelo Prisco about his entire life in the mafia. I've always been fascinated about what it is that allows individuals to die chained to a bed for something. What is so powerful about the mafia? Angelo Prisco would say this involving the mafia, quote, outside of you being the boss, this life sucks. It's like a catch-22. If you're the boss, you go to jail. This life, it ain't what it's cracked up to be. But in the end, he never wavered, and he died chained to a bed because of it. I hope you enjoyed this video. I'm sorry that it went a little bit long today. I know I shouldn't apologize for that, but I'm just so fascinated by these people and their lives, and I try to provide as much info as I can. I think Angelo Prisco is truly one of the more interesting people ever connected to the Genovese family. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I will tell Michael Prisco if he's watching, reach out to me. I'd love to speak to you. We'll see you next week here on the Sit Down.